Just this past week, we had two momentous decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court. Probably the most draconian was the striking down of Section 4 and Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, where the enforcement provision of the Voting Rights Act has been eliminated. They actually suggested that the U.S. Congress pass new guidelines to bring the Voting Rights Act up to date. And as we know, here in the state of Michigan, our voting rights have been grossly violated under this emergency manager law, which the majority of people in the state of Michigan voted against just in November. You never know that by reading the Detroit News and the Free Press. They pretend like the election never happened. Exactly. That the emergency manager is something that the people of Detroit want, that the people of the state of Michigan want, and that's a complete fabrication. So what this ruling actually confirms is what has already been going on here in the state of Michigan. There's been no enforcement of the Voting Rights Act, the 15th Amendment, even the Civil Rights Act of 1964 in terms of equal protection, the 14th Amendment, due process. You know, all the Civil Rights Acts have pretty much been thrown out here in the state of Michigan, and they want to do this all over the United States. In Shelby County, Alabama, there was a challenge that was launched against Section 4 and Section 5, and that was upheld in a 5-4 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. You know, we can discuss this, and also another ruling the day before on affirmative action, University of Texas Law School case, which is does nothing, you know, to advance affirmative action, equal opportunity here in the United States. Essentially allowed the person who had filed a complaint to get into the university, actually upheld her claim, and you know, actually told the lower courts that they have to refine the formula for utilizing race as a factor in the admission of people into higher education. It also has implications for other affirmative action cases throughout the country. So we can see clearly, just this past week, the attacks that are being leveled, you know, against the African American people, against people of color inside the United States. So it shows that we have to step up our mobilization, and you know, people are saying we need to put pressure on Congress, which is very important, but the only way that's going to happen, we got to have people in the streets that are organized, mobilized, and well educated about the issues. Okay, any other comments about the Supreme Court decisions this week? Yes, go ahead.
This is kind of related. Is that, I don't know if anybody knows about the Michigan Election Reform Alliance. Have you heard of that? They monitor elections. Okay. And they are monitoring the upcoming Detroit election. And so I didn't know if anybody's interested in being an observer for the upcoming Detroit election. I spoke with the woman, and she said elections all over the state are a mess. Like, some people are voting in pencil, some people are voting twice. I mean, we just have really basic problems in Michigan, I mean, that we can fix. You know, sometimes we need to look at what can we actually do concretely. So if anybody's interested in that, just let me know. It's the Michigan Election Reform Alliance.
All right. Okay. Any other comments about the Supreme Court? Okay.
Can I just say real briefly, at the same time, the Supreme Court issued a so-called positive ruling in striking down the Defense of Marriage Act, therefore allowing states to have, you know, equal rights for gay and lesbian couples to marry. Well, that was won not through the goodness of the hearts of the Supreme Court, but by the movement over years and years. And wouldn't you know that they did it at the same time? They are probably trying to pit people against each other. You know, they issued this vile racist crap, like this is a post-racial society or whatever they call it. And then, but gay and lesbian, you know, we can't be divided. You know, we can't turn against gay people because they got that right on. We should all win, you know. I just was a little bit worried when I saw that, oh, one day they do this, and then the next day everybody's celebrating about that, and they forget. No, we got to remember everybody needs their rights under the law.
Yeah, Gene?
I wanted to say, actually, that isn't a good law. What they did with both of those was they made it so that they took us back 100 years for civil rights and stuff, even gay rights. They made it so that LGBT, they'd be fine on the basis. You know, they couldn't discriminate against them on the basis, but in some states, if they left the service and in their state it wasn't acknowledged, then they're going to be under fire anyway. So they've really done a lot of damage to the country. And I also wanted to mention that the other day I heard a conversation with a radio guy, and he was saying that people should get out on the streets in Washington, or if they couldn't make it, demonstrate against the Capitol buildings for Martin Luther King in November. Martin Luther King Day.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so there's a lot going on. Quite a lot going on, and that's why we need to be vigilant.
I want to first go back a little bit to the Voting Rights Act. I think we need to understand that over the last few years, through various state legislatures, actually probably 4 out of 5 state legislators, attacks on the voting rights have been emerging. And it's no accident that's occurring at a time when the federal government, state governments want to push austerity onto the masses of the people. And austerity means cutbacks. And one of the ways that we can resist is through the electoral process, through the legislative process, by making appeals to our so-called elected representatives. And it's no accident, I don't think, that they're cutting that out at the time when we need to get out and voice our opposition to the cutbacks and make demands that our schools need to be funded, and our roads need to be funded, and our parks need to be taken care of, and our health care needs to be improved. Well, they're in a way distracting us, but they're also taking away one of the vehicles we have to resist this. And that shouldn't cause us to be demoralized. We should take that as a cue that we need to step up what we're doing, and we need to hit the streets even harder.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, the view of Moratorium Now is that the banks destroyed our neighborhoods. And every one of us that lives in Detroit and lives actually probably anywhere in Michigan can see what the banks have done. They have, every block in the city of Detroit, as far as everything I've seen, has an abandoned house on it, probably multiple abandoned houses. And what does that do? It undermines the tax base. The very banks that undermine the tax base, they committed fraudulent loans, they foisted them on us, they lied, they cheated. All of this is out there. Bank of America was even giving gift cards to people, to their own employees, if they would throw away the loan modification papers of people who were trying to seek loan modifications. So our view is they got a pound of flesh out of us already. And in fact, they got too much out of us already, and they need to pay us back for the damage that they've done. And that's why we're motivated to say, cancel the debt. Because they took away our ability to pay that debt. You heard in the Detroit News a few months ago, all these Detroiters are not paying property taxes. But the Detroit News forgot to tell you that half of the taxes are the banks refusing to pay property taxes on foreclosed properties. That's the money that would have been available to pay them back if we decide to pay them back. And they probably have owe property taxes on other properties that they haven't finished the transfer, claiming it away from or registering it with the Wayne County after they've evicted the families. A few weeks ago, Kevin Orr claimed that he had declared a moratorium on pensions, paying the pension obligation certificates. And I think it's interesting that he chose the timing. He decided he would not pay the pension obligation certificates 5 or 6 days before he meets with the unions. Now, those payments are not in official default yet. Have you noticed that? It's because I believe they have like a 15-day grace period before they're actually in default. They can maneuver around, just like when you're late with your credit card payment. There's some maneuvering ability. Then the bondholders, the trustees for the bonds, they have to make an official declaration that the city's in default. And they're going to be cautious about that, because once you do that, a whole chain of events happens. Now, let's go back to New York, 1975. I think most of us were alive then. Remember, the city of New York had a lot of financial problems, and one of the things they did was they declared a moratorium on bank payments too. What happened, though? When it was all said and done, the unions gave tremendous concessions, music was cut out of the schools in New York City, and the banks got every penny they were owed. So let's not be fooled by Kevin Orr. He's maneuvering, positioning himself to go into bankruptcy. And if he gets into bankruptcy, the constitutional protections on the city pensions, he's going to challenge them. And he's already said he's going to challenge them. And go to the Jones Day website, and they got some legal opinions about how they're going to be able to challenge it in bankruptcy. He's not talking just about Detroit, but Jones Day is talking about in general they can do that. And for those that don't know, the Jones Day law firm is a law firm that Kevin Orr came, from. Supposedly he resigned, but when he sent that notice out to the creditors to show up at Metro Airport for that meeting, that fax came from the Jones Day fax machines in Cleveland.
No.
Says it right across the top. And we got somebody in the media gave us a copy. We posted it online. If you don't believe me, it says Jones Day, Cleveland, right across the top. So I'm not sure if he's actually resigned from that firm. But that's a side question. That just shows what we're up against.
Wow.
But we need to pull everybody together. We need to protect the pensions. And we need to understand, for those of us that don't have the retiree pensions, that city workers don't get Social Security unless they paid in when they were in other jobs.
Police and fire.
That's police and fire.
Okay, I thought all city.
No.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Police and
Okay.
fire.
I know my sister works, or my father worked for the federal government, and he got no Social Security. There's arrangements that can be made. Well, I was wrong on that. But anyway, if they're just reduced to Social Security, it's nothing. We need to build a movement that defends the city pension system, the current city workers, the assets of the city. We need to pull everybody together, because if they pick us off one at a time,
And they're doing it.
we're done. It's our unity and our numbers that are going to get us through that. In other words, we shouldn't offer up the DIA assets like some people are saying and trade them for something else, because then someone else is going to go along and say, I don't go fishing in Bella. Let's give that up. Or no one in my family gets a pension from the city. Let's give that up. No, we need to stand united on this to the very end and not let them do any horse trading with any of us. And because it's the banks. And I just want to say one other thing. The whole world is watching.
Yes. We're on
And
the stage.
Because
Detroit is.
whether people realize it or not, whatever we give up here, every single city and state government in this country is going to be next.
Yep.
It's going to be precedent setting. And if we've got relatives, if any of you are in other associations or civic organizations that have allies outside the city, we need to call on everybody to step forward, because this is no exaggeration. This will be precedent-setting cutbacks that will sweep through the municipalities. Detroit's not the only one that's in trouble. The Chicago teachers are fighting interest rate swaps as well. And Detroit and Chicago have among the highest interest rate swap payments out there. And if we give up something here, maybe the teachers and the workers in Chicago will be next. Who knows? But let's stand united on this. Let's recognize that it's the banks that are our enemy, and let's take them down. They produce nothing useful in this society. And one other thing, I keep saying one other thing. July 1st, student interest rate loans double. The interest rate on student loans double. And my guess is we're going to have allies real quick. Because it's literally the same scoundrels that destroyed our neighborhoods, that own all our debt, that are also squeezing some of us and our kids and our relatives. This is big, and we've got to, our perspective has to be the banks, because behind the curtain, it's the banks. They're pulling the chains and doing all this and tricking us with all kinds of stuff, but let's not lose our focus that it's the banks. And they don't want this democracy because they don't want us to legally resist them.
Probably the reason why Jones Day sent out that notice was because they've been hired by the city, $3.3 million contract to supposedly renegotiate, the bond payments and the loans with these crooks, these financial institutions, which is clearly a conflict of interest, which people spoke out against, and which the city council voted in favor of. And one other thing I wanted to mention was that now he's talking about launching an investigation into the pension funds, not against the banks that destroyed the city, but the pension funds, and that's just the rationale.
Disabled pensioners.
Yes, that's just the rationale for setting up a justification for taking over the pension funds. We're talking about $5 to $6 billion that they want to get their hands on to give to their friends on Wall Street. Andrea, you had something, and then Jerry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we need to get out of this delusion, okay? That we are going to vote for somebody, and that when we vote for somebody and he gets into office, that he is going to do what is necessary for us to be able to move on with a quality of life. Because that ain't happening, okay? It didn't happen with the president on down, okay? It's not happening with city council, and it's not happening with the mayor. The city is under siege by a capitalist class. And so we need to recognize who this class is and where their power is. The power is in the banks, and that's where it started first in 2008, the collapse of the system. Had a domino effect all the way up to now. Okay, and we tried to petition our representatives, to which they seem to be opportunists, okay, who want to get paid to participate in this siege that's going on. And so we got Kevin Orr. They also have agents. Kevin Orr, the mayor, seems to be an agent, and some of city council seem to be agents. So we can't depend on them. We need a people's referendum to get started now, to where we elect our own people. And we don't even basically have to vote for them, you know what I'm saying? Because we have leaders. We have leaders, and we can see them here at this table. And we need to get behind these leaders. These are our elected people, because we can no longer trust. We can't even trust the court system anymore, because the court system is peppered with people that are part of a federalist society, okay? And their agents are supposed to block anything that comes forward to them that's going to help the people. So if we don't have the judiciary behind us, and we don't have our elected officials behind us, and we don't have the executive branch behind us, and we don't even have the military behind us for that matter yet, then we need to get out of that delusion now and come up with the people's referendum, which is what we're doing right now. And that is to say what we want. To push what we want, we have to get out there in the street and take it. This is how it's going to have to be. So we're going to have to put some fear in them so that they can recognize now and see numbers. That people no longer are believing in the fake and false system that is a ruse right now. It's just to rob us even further, because they want to rob us. And the last treasure trove is the pension system in Detroit. And you know, whatever Belle and all of, our jewels, we call them jewels, they want that too. But it's been hard for them to get. So they had to go through it the way that they did. The banks first, and then that domino effect all the way down to the EM. And now here's the EM, and he's just taking what he wants. All right, and he has totally neutralized any elected officials. And they even went back and made a law, like was mentioned here at the table. The people were against this. Okay, and they went out in numbers, and they did what they were supposed to do in a civil way. They didn't go out trying to get weapons for a revolution. Maybe they should have done that, but they didn't do that. And see, even when they act in a civil way, and it goes up to the judiciary, what happens? Then another agent, the governor, goes and gets with the legislature and make a new law. Okay, so that law is null and void now. So what was the purpose for even mobilizing in those numbers? You know what I'm saying? And going to the court. And we can't do that. We have to get out. We can do it. We should. I'm not saying we shouldn't use the court, because the court is good for historical purposes and documentation of what is exactly going on. So we do need to do that. But yeah, the main thing is that we have to get out there now and get really bold. And we have to take it to another level. And more people need to come in because it's going to take a people's referendum. And we need to start this people's referendum now as to what it is that we want. Okay? And then what we're going to do by ourselves to get it.
Okay, Jerry, I think was next.
Just want to make a couple comments. I think it's important to reflect a little bit on what OR is saying and how it's being projected by the media and what the reality is. Because OR comes across, pretty rational. And actually, if you read OR's reports, the one thing you'll say about OR's reports is they do lay out pretty much what we've been saying all along, that it's the massive debt service to the banks that is strangling the city, that makes the city in a position where literally the city has no revenue after it pays the banks to deal with services. And his reports pretty objectively and openly say that, just as we've been saying for years, and basically support what we've been saying for years. And that's very important. In fact, the first report he issued made clear that the city pays well over $100 million just in interest to the banks. Interest, that's profit to the banks, which is more than the entire city deficit. That's just profit to the banks, and that doesn't include the principal, which raises it to well over $200 million, and not including the water board. But when OR presents it, the way the media presented his statement when he made to the creditors, the big headlines were he's going to be asking the creditors to take a big 10 cents on the dollar, a big cut. And they announced this moratorium on debt. Everyone was calling us, telling us we won. You got your moratorium. And he announces the moratorium on the pension obligation certificate. So he comes off like why he's going to go after the banks, and then it's the greedy pensioners who better be willing to give too, because they were at the expense of the rest of Detroiters. And that's really kind of his tone, and that's how and then the media puts that tone out there. That's the tone that's being set up by the media for people to swallow all this crap. And of course, that order looks even better when you look at city council, which is in total disarray. I mean, the president's on the lam, the ground sold out. It makes it look like the elected officials we've had have been in tough, which is truthfully true in the last period. So the issues then becomes is to cut through the crap and to get so we can continue to answer where things are at with right now, and which I think reflects the perspective we've been putting forth. First of all, it came out that the day before OR met with the creditors, one of the largest investment holders, this Lumens, issues a report saying they're not at all worried about OR's talk about the payment to the banks, and because what they said is exactly what we said. Under the statute, under the Emergency Manager Act, OR is pledged to pay fully the debt service to the banks. He has the authority to bust union contracts, and he just announced he's refusing to negotiate with AFSCME or the police or anybody else.
DPOA.
He has the authority to bust union contracts. He has the authority to just about do anything to bust any contract and service for the people, but he's mandated to pay debt service, and the investment bankers said they're not too worried about the posturing because that's what the law says, and that came out right before OR's statement, and there's a good article in it in Voice of Detroit that he went to the source, and the source, and you go to the source, it's right there. That's very important. Secondly, what OR actually said to the creditors is that, and he pointed out, is that most of Detroit's debt is what's called secured debt. And his definition of secured debt is very broad. So while he declared a moratorium, a temporary moratorium on the pension obligation certificates, what he actually said is that secured debt that has to be paid because it's secured by the casino tax revenue, and he's right. Casino tax revenue goes to a trustee, right. And we don't. It doesn't. People think casino tax. It doesn't even go into the treasury anymore.
$50 million a year.
It goes to pay a trustee to pay off what they call the pension obligation certificates, which we pointed out are nothing but fraudulent loans that the city got trapped into by the banks. So that's secured debt. Most of what they call general obligation debt, debts that they float to just keep the city operating, is secured by state revenue sharing. Almost all of it is, if you look. So that means that almost all the money, now first the state revenue sharing has been cut in half, so that's one of the problems that the city has. But on top of that, even if we got the revenue sharing, it's there to secure debt to the banks. So almost all the debt that he's talking is secured debt. And he said very openly in his press conference, oh no, the secured debt's going to be paid. It's the unsecured creditors where we're going to deal with. That's a very small proportion. And he said it. It's a very small proportion of that. So that's very important to know. On the pensions, he made very clear that he intends to go after the pensions. And he said that he have, while there is it was interesting what he said. He said, while he acknowledged the constitutional guarantee, he said, well, that can be changed legislatively. I don't know how. I think it would take a constitutional amendment to change the Constitution, unless he's got something up his sleeve there. But basically he said that they have the alternative. It can still be negotiated. And again, in bankruptcy, the feeling is that those pensions are not going to be guaranteed. And I just say all this to say, with all the crap that's come out, we shouldn't have any illusions about what Orr is about. His position is to guarantee the payment of debt service to the banks. That's what it's about, and that's what he's going to do. And that's what the agenda is. And they may take a few minor cuts to banks, but the cuts they're going to take, and that doesn't go to anywhere near the crisis we have. And of course, what Orr refuses to talk about, it's kind of reminiscent of the Supreme Court decision. It's like racism never existed in this country, so we don't need affirmative action anymore. Well, what world are we living in, it denies the history of the U.S. well, just the same way. What Orr is doing is taking a snapshot of Detroit when he came into Detroit while ignoring what's happened to Detroit. And we all know, we live in Detroit. We know that Detroit, after going through a total economic war when Chrysler and the Big Three shut almost all the factories in Detroit, when we finally started recovering from that in the early 2000s, the next blow was the subprime mortgage crisis that led to wholesale foreclosures, 130,000 foreclosures based on predatory lending by the banks. There's a study that came out just this month, a couple months ago, that said that Detroit has 75,000 foreclosed homes, 65% of them are vacant. That's the blight in the city. Orr talked a lot about blight. But where does the blight come from? It comes from the foreclosures that occurred by the banks that came in, took everybody's homes, and destroyed our neighborhood. Orr will not talk about that. He refuses to. And then and we've been raising even about this idea of criminal investigations. So he takes that and says, I'm going to go after the pensioners as a way to weaken the pensioners instead of going after the banks. It was interesting that today there was a decision that came down where Deutsche Bank was ordered to pay $11 million to the city of Los Angeles for blight, for the destruction of homes in Los Angeles as a result of foreclosures. Well, you go to Los Angeles don't look like Detroit.
That's right.
The blight in Detroit is unprecedented. Right. And if Los Angeles could get that, why shouldn't we? And the city of Los Angeles is receiving $11 million just from Deutsche Bank. That's just one bank. Well, if they can get it, we're owed, and that's our point. And Orr is refusing to address that part of the crisis. And again, what we have to keep emphasizing is that the exact people who caused the crisis are the ones who now are claiming first lien on our tax dollars. Or when we met, Orr is acknowledged, and in bankruptcy, and I'm not a bankruptcy lawyer or anything, but bankruptcy is what they call equitable. It's an equitable proceeding. In other words, what you can argue is that where the actions, there's a doctrine called unclean hands. Where the creditor has unclean hands, or they usually use it against the debtor because we know how the courts work, or if a debtor has unclean hands, well, then that affects the disposition of how the debt is dealt with. Well, what we're saying is that banks have unclean hands.
Yes.
They don't have unclean hands, they have filthy hands. And we don't owe them a penny. Bloody hands. And that's how we have to approach this. And we can't be sitting here, we don't want to come out like cheerleaders. Some people, we should just throw in a bank. Well, no, we don't take that position. We know whatever proceeding we're in, everything is under the law and under bankruptcy too, is geared toward creditors. Because that's the system we live in. The capitalist system is geared to creditors. And that's what we're dealing with. But the struggle can turn it around. And that's what we have to say. And whatever the form, whether he goes to bankruptcy or tries to negotiate beforehand, to me that's not the fundamental question. The fundamental question is, are the people going to rise up to challenge the system? If we rise up, we will change the equation. If we don't rise up, all the cards are their cards, whether it's before bankruptcy, because the law says the banks get paid, and also that they can declare termination events on these events. In other words, that we're on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars just because of an emergency manager, which, we don't need to go into all that today, but that's there too. Or we can, and in bankruptcy, there's no question. If people rely on the courts, bankruptcy judges, like all federal judges, are geared to the people they deal with on a daily basis. They deal to I litigate foreclosure. You would think we'd go into court every day and the judges would rule against the banks, because every day there's a new revelation about how crooked the banks are. But that's not how judges are. Judges are, they're alienated from the workers. They're part of the system. It's the struggle that will matter, whether we're in bankruptcy or whether we're not. It doesn't really matter fundamentally. We can't predicate our struggle on what forum this is going to be carried out. What we got to predicate our struggle is that they are filthy, bloody hands, and that the bankers who destroyed our city we don't owe them a dime.
They owe us.
The secured with the first. Security isn't a pension supposed to be a secure day? You work your whole life to get a pension? You put 30 years in, and some Wall Street guy picks up a bond for a day, and his pension, his bond is more secured than your lifetime of labor? Well, that's ridiculous. And we have to redefine the debate, but that's not going to happen through the courts. And it's fine, like Andrea said, we're all for all the court proceedings. It's going to happen through class struggle, and we got to wake people up. And there's no alternative, and fast. And fast, and that's
immediately.
Really. And I think we shouldn't have any illusions about we can answer everything he said, but the basic thing we should say is look at the law. His job's to protect the bankers. That's why he's in office. They have no illusions about it. And the biggest indication was. He has a meeting with the creditors. The next week he has a meeting with the unions, and he doesn't even show up. He doesn't even show up. Send some flunky, But that tells you how seriously he was negotiating. And then declares all the contracts are void the next week. So let's not have illusions, and let's not take it in by his error of rationality and reasonableness, because he does. And he gets the publicity to Orr has been nothing but favorable in this city. Well, except for us. And we got to stay out there and keep it going and keep on track and feel confident in our positions, because we are confident in it. And the question's going to be whether we can wake up the masses, the sleeping giant in Detroit. And also, just shut up. And the last point is that someone raised, the whole country's eyes are on Detroit. The same thing in Detroit is happening all over the country. And we're not in this fight alone. We can win over. If the Detroiters stand up, we will get solidarity.
Yeah.
We will get solidarity from Stockton and the 60 cities in California that are facing from Harrisburg, from Jefferson County, from oppressed cities all over the country, and from countries all over the world, like Greece and Portugal, where they have general strikes to challenge the same kind of crap that we're having here. We can get solidarity. This can become Detroit. Can be a focus for an international struggle against the banks and against austerity. But the people of Detroit gotta create a base right here for them.
Yeah, when you mentioned about Los Angeles, how they got the money that they needed, how did they do it? Did we look at what their plan was and how they did it, and maybe we can kind of pattern?
You mean the judgment, the $11 million?
Yeah, how did they, how did they do it?
Well, their city government did a lawsuit, which they refused to do here. Well, so they found a way to do it. They did a lawsuit. Now, unfortunately, Bing had refused any kind of actions against the banks. We've got that on first-hand knowledge from Crystal Crittenden. But so what? Let Orr do it. Orr's in charge now. Go after the banks. He can figure it out. It's up to them to figure out how to do it. But they defined it as what's called a public nuisance. And whether the theories legally on it are up and down, but the ones who can do it are the city officials that can do it. And right now, he's the city official making them do it.
What we've heard so far in terms of privatization of trash collection, the privatization of the operation of the water department, privatization of public lighting, is not going to do anything to save money or to improve the conditions of people here in Detroit. And they never even make that argument. If they claim we owe $18 to $20 billion, how is saving $14 billion in trash collection?
14 billion.
Yeah, million, right. How is that going to contribute, to this huge deficit? It's not going to contribute to that. It's only going to contribute to the busting of the unions and the further demoralization and the repression of people here in the city of Detroit. So when we hear all these arguments about privatization is going to help the deficit, we need to answer that and say that's incorrect. It's not going to help that. Debbie?
Well, just want to remind people, New York City in the 70s was in economic crisis. It was huge. And the fact of it is that at no time during that period was New York City ordered or forced to sell out any of its major resources. It just didn't happen. And the other thing is that it's like Abiyam is saying, we really have to stand up and say no. Right. I mean, I would ask each of us to look around any forum, any event that the EM puts up, announces or whatever. We have to find a way to get out there and make sure it is no longer business as usual. When we can cease business as usual, when we can so interrupt business, they're going to have to deal with us. And the fact of it is that yes, in all that crap that backs the emergency manager, a very important aspect is that they are supposed to, he is endowed with going after any party, entity, individual whose activities resulted in the economic crisis. There it is, what we've been saying all along. The foreclosures have bankrupted this city, has resulted in hundreds of thousands of people leaving Detroit, thousands and tens of thousands of homes, and our property values are in the toilet. Here it is, this great city with these wonderful, magnificent homes, and some of these homes are selling for $3,000 and $5,000. We'll never be able, it'll take a long time to recoup what they have taken away from us. So when he sticks his head out of his tortoise shell, we should be there waiting on him. I don't care what it is. He going to lunch.
Go ahead.
Damn it, we don't run into somebody picketing him and telling him what to do. That's what we have to do. I'm serious. We really have to think about this, sisters and brothers. It cannot be business as usual, because the business of the ruling class and the banks is to maximize their profits. They could give up. They don't care about you. They don't care about you. And the fact that they would go after pensions, of people, and claim they've been talking all along, like city workers have been making it a reason that the city is in such debt. Excuse me? I know people who work for the city, and for the last decade, city workers have taken nothing but cuts. Nothing but cuts. Cuts after cuts after cuts. And it still isn't enough. So, you know what? We got to take off the gloves.
Absolutely.
We got to stop being nice.
That's right.
And we got to show, and just to show you why, we're going to have to act up. That ruling on the voting rights bill is the most racist,
Yes.
anti-people, anti-worker thing they have come down, well, a pile of many. But that's what we have to do. And you know what? We got to pull that along too. Because it's all related.
Yep.
And we got to make sure that in the process we get back what we are what is ours. And the city of Detroit belongs to the people. It don't belong to Bank of America. You know, the criminals. And just one more thing and I'm through. Every day we read in the headlines in the business, of course they keep it out of the rag Detroit Free Press and the news, but you read in the paper of the criminal acts and deeds of these major banks every day. They actually one bank was actually rewarding people, their employees, with the money cards or some little gift cards for screwing up people's foreclosure when they were going to the banks to try to hold off foreclosures. They were paying them. Now, tell me that ain't criminal. If you and I were doing that, do you know they would swat your house with a tank and bring it down? So I say, let's swat the banks. Bring them down. That's the only thing that's the only thing left that we got to do. That's our power. Is unifying and deciding there will no longer be business as usual.
All right. Yeah, Cynthia then David.
I think that, and I'm 100% in agreement with you. I think we all are. The elephant in the room is the bank, are the banks. One of the things that I think that we need to do is to contact or identify all the people who have mortgages, who have either lost their homes and or who are losing their homes. Because it appears that unless you are experiencing this immediate thing, and all of us are, we just all don't know that we are, it seems like it's not my problem. So, but it is our problem. Even though you may not be experiencing it, you are experiencing it. So if we can identify people who have mortgages and in some kind of way have them to contact this 800 line so that we can get them energized to take part in this action that we need to do against the banks. Other than that, I really can't see how we can fight against the banks. We just have to, like someone said, we have to get the people involved.
I agree. David?
Well, that's it. They didn't hand anybody civil rights in this country. 100 years crap went along. Till people, and usually it was young people, but older people too, took to the streets and found ways to express themselves, and it was a life and death struggle. They didn't hand unions to anybody in this country. It was a felony. It was a conspiracy to join a union for decades. So what we're talking about is a civil rights, a union organizing, a women's right, a people's movement. That doesn't just happen because we click our hands, but it happens because people cannot go on any longer in the same way. Even South Africa, how did people go on for decades under apartheid? How did they do it? Their leaders being tortured and killed in jail. But at some point, and no one knew when, because people were fighting from the beginning. 1948 they started. But it wasn't until the 70s, really, that it became greater, 60s and then the 70s and the 80s, that, as they say, South Africa became ungovernable. So we're talking about a mass movement.
How can we get an 800 line?
Hold on a second. Because it is not going to be easy, and it's not going to be because we click our hands, or not because we know it all. We know a lot. And it's not going to be hard to explain to people that the banks are criminal. They cheated you out of your homes, and they cheated the city out of their, in these bond swaps. And they're criminal entities, and we shouldn't pay the banks. And I was very proud to be part of the march, 50th anniversary march for Dr. King's historic march down Woodward. But to be honest, most people were there in an honorary way. And what we did, we raised the banner, and I know where Dr. King would have been. Dr. King would have been on the other end of the banner with you, which said, cancel the debt. Because a lot of his message was also economic. They don't tell you a lot of that nowadays, but he was for economic justice. So we raised cancel the debt. We used to talk about a moratorium. Now we're saying cancel. People can understand this. And if you tell people your pension is at stake, if they pay the banks, they're not paying your pension. You know, in my neighborhood now, 2 days delay. Thursday's garbage day. They picked it up this morning. Well, what is that about? They're getting people ready so that when Orr says I'm privatizing, people say, yeah, great. Finally, I don't have my stinking garbage out there for 2 days. It's a but if we tell people your pension or pay the banks, what do you want? You want them to pay the banks or fight for your pension? And you know what? There's a deafening silence. I'm ashamed. I was a union president for 14 years, city workers, but the unions are
terrible.
Are silent. And I don't think it's a question of being bought off. At least they would have gotten something. I think they have no idea what to do. Because who in this country has talked about canceling the debt? You've got to be radical out of your mind to talk about that. Except it's the only solution now. So we're going to have to go around. Tell people you want city services? Cancel the debt. You want a pension? We're going to have to fight to cancel the debt. You want workers, you want your 20%. I know Andreas, 20%, 10% cut in pay, 10% hours cut. I don't know how you're living. How do people living on 20% cut?
Downside.
Right. Downside. So, but we need a mass movement.
Yes, we do.
And it's not easy, but there's more people here than started the Montgomery bus boycott. There are more people in this room than started the Montgomery bus boycott planning. We can do that. It's not because our ideas are so wonderful or complex. It's because they're simple and everyone's at stake. I know if we can get in front of the retirees with Walter here and Blaney and James and me and a couple other people, you folks are going to flock to us. It's not going to be a problem getting them out. If they understand and believe that they're going to believe it. Not because we tell them, because it's going to be in the news. The New York, I might as well go into this retiree thing.
Yeah, I think Wayne had something.
Okay.
We could talk about the retirees.
All I
Okay.
want to say is, because I want to piggyback off of what he was saying about the unions. In my opinion, there has been some degree of buying off, because the fact that the separation with the unions to me is, like, we have Council 25, and then we have our presidents, they control the locals and all of that. This Council 25 and these local presidents are not on the same page when it comes to strategy or any kind of action. And I've gone to different meetings. I just came from one before here at King Solomon. I tried to encourage some of my members to come down. I still haven't seen any of my members. That's the biggest stumbling block to me, is to get it, and it's like it filters down so that the overall membership is affected. And the overall membership is apathetic right now. And I don't know what it's going to take to get there, because I've been preaching for I was an active member of AFSCME for years. I spent my last year being a union steward because I shied away from it. But once I became a union steward, I got a better insight into the struggle, into what it takes. And it's monumental, man. Right now I don't have any answers, but
3 words: fight or die.
Okay, all right. Okay.
that's it.
Fight it
I
is.
like it.
Bottom line.
We've been saying since the Moratorium Now coalition was created in, what was it, 2007, that we've been raising the criminal role of the banks, and studies subsequent to that time in different areas of the country as well as throughout the U.S. have proven that the banks had a deliberate, well-crafted policy of targeting African Americans, Latinos, and women for these subprime predatory loans. The criminal activity that Debbie and Jerry and others have talked about is well documented. Many cities, many attorneys general in different states have sued the banks over the last 5 or 6 years. There was a big lawsuit in Baltimore. Of course, here in Michigan, the attorney generals haven't touched it. The city of Detroit, none of the cities or municipalities have had the guts at all to raise any kind of lawsuit against these banks. But we have to remind people that this, Orr says he is just dealing with the problem that he was handed. Well, that problem comes from somewhere, and it comes from criminal activity. So paying the banks what his primary duty is void and null, because that debt stems from criminal activity on the part of the banks. The banks have caused the ruin of Detroit. You drive around my neighborhood, David Street alone, he lives a half a mile from me. His is the only house occupied on that entire block. It's terrible what's happening. But now, your trash is getting picked up 2 days late because they want to butter you up for privatize the company, right? In my neighborhood, for the last 2 weeks, I can hardly hear myself think because they're putting in new telephone poles and they're in the neighborhoods cutting the trees down. And they're really doing something. They're buttering people up to think, and it's going to happen. They're going to spend money like they planned in certain neighborhoods. I live in East English Village. They want to keep that neighborhood. The rest of Detroit, hell, a year ago I heard they want to make water parks and put marinas in the middle of the city. Turn it into some kind of vacation land for rich people to come to. But we can't let them anybody forget for 1 minute. It's the banks that caused this problem. It's not enough to say a moratorium on the debt service. It's cancel the debt. And all over the world, people have risen up to say those same demands. Cancel the debt. We could never pay the debt. The people in Greece know they could never pay back the banks and live and eat and have a job. People all over Latin America. Cuba repudiated their debt to the United States. All over Latin America, countries have said, we're not going to be under the stranglehold of these U.S. corporations and U.S. banks. We got to do the same thing here. We can't let our neighbors or anybody forget. We're in this mess because of the banks. We shouldn't have to pay them. They owe us.
All right. Absolutely. Okay, we got Baxter and then Marion. Then we'll move on to the retirees.
I just want to say, my man is Steve. We got here in your organization. I'm forgetting the name is on my keep at the platform. They have a bus.
Right.
And one of the things they talk about doing is going around to the different neighborhoods and educating people. Because when talking about apathy, it comes from a fear
Yes.
It's a fear that's holding the people back. It's just like I always say to you every time. He is like a bully. He's in the Bible, like a David and a Goliath. Everybody's scared of Goliath.
Yes.
So they're doing a challenge him. They know he's wrong, but they hope he don't see them and come after them. If he beat up you, they don't help you because they scared that Goliath is going to come after them. So we have to teach our people that we can defeat the bully and show them that their fear is not good for them. That's what we gotta do.
That's right.
That'll wake up the sleeping giant.
All right.
That'll wake him up.
I'm for that. Preach.
Mary?
That's right.
And then we'll go to talk about it. Go ahead.
Well, when Jared was talking earlier, if that was recorded, if any other group of people heard what he was saying, they would know how the banks did what they did. And Chris here is telling us that it's documented in different cities. Well, we need to see the documentation. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but somebody who's going to interpret it, somebody needs to see it. It needs to be put out there. On the bus, like Baxter says, somehow people need to know. Well, I talked to 2 people last night who didn't know anything about the banks, and they're intelligent people. And I explained what I could, but it was just, it needs 2 or 3 hours. But I left the Michigan Citizen paper with them, and one of them called this morning and said, "That's really good. I might subscribe to this paper." People need to know why, not just our conclusions that the banks are doing it, but how they did it. They need proof. They need the same kind of proof we do.
Can I answer that? Can I help answer that? We have a paper right here, Workers' World paper. Why people don't read it, I don't know. Because if you had read it within the last year, you'd be up to speed on exactly what they did, how they did it, why they did it, and also the history of them doing it, not just in the last decade, but for the last century probably. So, you have to read. You got to get the information. You got to know where to get information, because every paper is not going to, if you're a reader, then you should be picking up some papers that can really tell you some facts.
I'm sorry, but I see the Weekly World when I come here. And occasionally someone hands me one when I'm standing in line at the DIA or something. We can't wait for people to come here.
That's right.
Subscribe to it.
Right.
Yeah, we have to get out. Of course.
Yeah, and it has to be everywhere. Most people don't know anything about the Michigan Citizen. That's fairly good. It's pretty good. But people don't know it.
Okay, Debbie, real quick, then we need to go to the...
I just wanted to say that what you need, of course, is validation of the things that we've said. Well, that even its own major tool, the New York Times and the LA Times, they themselves are the ones that printed the stories beyond talking about the criminal acts of the banks. They're the ones that exposed, in their coverage, the fines and all of the allegations and charges and indictments of banks for all manner of things, including a major thing, that the banks in this country are the primary instruments for laundering money, drug money. Yeah. They've never stopped doing that. Right. And when you see, so it's all there. I understand what you're talking about. Well, how this happened, but it's been there. They don't mind saying it, because the fact of it is, is that in the end, that the courts give them a fine. You charge a bank that has $100 billion in assets, $25 million for being a criminal. They'll pay that in a heartbeat, which they do. One thing that I think we need to do is to start going out. You know, here we all live in different neighborhoods in the city of Detroit. So why don't you go knock on the doors and talk to people and say, hey, I'm having a meeting in my house on the, you know, what's going on in the city. Why don't you come over, bring a cookie, I'll give you some coffee, and let's sit down and talk about it. You gotta try to get people off the mark. And we can only do it so much at these meetings, but the fact of it is that if you have the opportunity to bring together a group of people, let us know. We'll send a voice over there with all the documentation you need, and we'll spend a few hours with these people,
Great
your
idea.
community, and tell them, okay, this is, because really,
Great idea.
this is how we have to get people to look that there is something they can do. It's something they have to do. They have to step forward because we're either going to fight to keep our city, or they're gonna take it over. And just my last thing. A few years ago, Washington, D.C. was a majority black city. I just want to let you know that the ruling class decided, oh no, that can't happen. Now, there's hardly any African Americans in Washington, D.C. because they gentrified the city completely.
You don't even know it now. You're in the same
And so there's no longer, you know, I mean, there's a black population in Washington, D.C. But let me tell you, when they want something back, they do whatever is necessary to get it back. Sisters and brothers, they want Detroit back.
Absolutely.
And we got to make sure they don't get it.
I had reached out to a few retirees, just a handful. We had a meeting about a week and a half ago. But I had called one person who I really respected and very militant, retired worker, and said, well, come on to the meeting. They were planning to come. And she called me and said, oh, you have to cancel the meeting. I said, why? Because I'm going to go to the meeting with Orr at the City County building, and we have to hear what he says first. Well, I understood where she was coming from, but you know what? I read the New York Times to her, and its New York Times front page said, bondholders in Detroit, it was an article, Detroit, bondholders no mood to compromise, a major confrontation coming between the retirees and the bondholders. That's all I needed to know. This continued on the business page in a big article. They are not hiding this fact. Why are we saying the retirees aren't a special category? People who receive city services, the thousands of city workers are also important. Everybody's important here in the city. But the retirees have a lot of time on their hands. And the retirement fund has $3 to $5 billion, depending on who you talk to. Money. That's what they want. Do you think they want to sell Diego Rivera pieces from the mural? Try to get some money? Well, you got $5 billion cash, stocks and bonds that they could just loot. So this is why we've had an eye on that and feel that the retirees can play a special role, but not separate, but as part of the broad movement to fight the EM, fight the banks. And they need to understand that. And so the other thing was that, or if you notice, when he spoke out at the airport, they gave that 50-page report. He specifically said he was going to get money from the pensions and put $1.2 billion to revitalize the city. It's going to take it from the retired workers to, well, what is that? So people would say, yeah, screw the retirees, let's get our garbage and our lights and all that. Trying to pit people against each other. That was his words. 1.2 billion for city service revitalization of the city from the pensioners. Well, some of us read the papers and we saw that the pension boards, there's two pensions, Detroit General Pension Fund and the Uniform Services, and they had put together $5 million war chest from their funds to prepare to fight in court. And then we talked to some folks from the DRCEA, Detroit Retired City Employees Association. It has 6,500 dues-paying members. And one of their officers told us, we're going to fight it in court, too. Go to court. Jerry told you he's in court in front of the judge. You go to court without a mass movement in the streets that they fear for their very lives, then we're going to lose. So we're not against them going to court, we're for it, but we need to try to get them, and I don't know if they're going to help us mobilize, but we need to not wait for them, we need to mobilize. So we had a small meeting, Walter Knoll was there, myself, Cheryl LaBash was not here, and a few others, and we met and decided we were going to set up a subcommittee, a committee of retirees, and start reaching out. And I see 2 more retired volunteers here, because we need to reach those. There's something like 8,000, 10,000, I don't know, 10,000 retired city workers. And there are a couple meetings coming up. So I don't want to take all your time, but we want a special leaflet for the retirees, telling them what everyone's doing and about the debt, cancel the debt, all this educational stuff. But let me tell you, you won't need to read a lot if you're a retiree and your check comes and you're expecting $1,500 and you get $1,200. They said in Greece they're now receiving 30% cut in their pensions, government workers. And I tell you, I read 2 things just the last 2 days. My wife got a prescription, pharmacy advantage bill. Oh, yeah. Used to be $20. $100 now. Yeah. Each, right? And I got from HAP, well, HAP was all your tests were free. I had a test done. It was an $80 test, never paid that. I'm paying $43. Well, these are small things, but this is over a whole year. It's a lot of money. And when you're on fixed income, there's no more of that good overtime we used to get at water to make up a little bit. And that's what's going to move a lot of people in there. They're going to ask, and we'll have some answers for them, and we'll need some organization. So we're planning to go to the Ask Me as a Retires Union local, and there's also the DRCEA luncheon coming up in July. And before any other city retirees here, so we have 4 of us here, and we have contact with a few more. Don't leave. We'll talk about specifically getting a leaflet ready and for intervening with that. If people don't believe you when you're talking to them now, they're not now talking about cutting health care for all the Pontiac school workers, eliminating it. Let them go to Obamacare. And in Stockton, Jerry will tell you, the federal judge is hearing arguments that the arguments, he hasn't decided yet, that whether or not the pension funds can be taken from the retirees and shipped over to pay off the debt to the banks. And that's what we're facing. So we're going to be part of this, a broader movement. We're going to have a subcommittee within it. And if they have some court bankruptcy hearings, we're going to need some attorneys. We need to start thinking about that now to go in there and demand to be represented. Because if it's equitable, then we need a say in it. And we can't go in with 5 people. We need 500. Did anybody, and I'm going to end on this, did anybody see in Texas a few nights ago when the state representative was standing up for 12 hours, a filibuster to stop the right-wing Republican steamroller on abortion? Well, one person standing up, what was that? But there were hundreds and hundreds of people came out when they started hearing about it. I called my sister to ask her, why didn't she go down there? She said, I was there. She's 67 years old.
Right on.
And you got to hear this. She said she was there till midnight. and she said it was mostly young people, and they were all tweeting and twittering and whatever they do. It was a lot of young people, and as she was leaving at midnight, they were still letting people in as people left. And the young people knocked each other and said, "Look, even the grandmas are here." So we're going to get young people, we're going to get the grandmas and grandpas, and we're going to fight this because people want to fight back, and we'll give them a way to fight back.
Okay, we got about another 20 minutes, and I want us to discuss future actions. So far, we've been talking about doing further outreach in the neighborhoods. We produced 5,000 leaflets. We need to get more leaflets. We need to refine the leaflets. We talked about neighborhood meetings. You know, people are willing to host meetings in their homes, among their block club members, in their churches, mosques, whatever. We need to get this information out to the people. Press work. We've done a lot of press work. We need to do more to get our press releases and do our own independent media like that's being done here today. And we need other ideas for the next few weeks. And we need to move fast on this.
Yeah.
Because these people are trying to steamroll this whole situation and ram it down our throats and treat it as if it's a fait accompli. And it is not. I think we can intervene. We've intervened so far in this struggle. And even if he takes the city into bankruptcy, which is highly likely, we can still intervene in the bankruptcy. We can. If we're organized, we can do that. So I want to open up right now for questions. I think Mike, proposals and for action. We got Mike, Fred, Jerry, Umar.
Oh, Muhammad. Yeah.
Muhammad, right, okay. All right. Mike, go ahead.
I got several points. I think what Marilyn is saying is that we need to get information, not for us here, but for the neighborhoods.
Right.
So I'd like to propose that a subgroup gets set up, and we do this quickly, that we come up with a brochure that identifies and also lists sources if people want to learn more. But all the evidence that we have of bank fraud and bad behavior, because it's coming out, actually, it's coming out every day. There's more and more, in all the different markets that they commit fraud. If you can commit fraud, they've done it. It's just a question of people finding out. So I would like to suggest that we come up with maybe a brochure, 8.5 by 11 folded in half with bullet points, and then places where people can go to get more information. We're starting to collect a lot of this fraud information on Detroit Debt Moratorium website. Hit the tag fraud, and all the articles that list fraud will come up. And Senator Levin's report also, it's this thick, it talks about the fraud. Okay, that was from 2 years ago. I think we need to start, I don't know if we have time to do it, but maybe we can at our Monday meetings. Let's start talking about going through the neighborhoods with propaganda, door to door, talking to people and getting the message out. It's going to be a lot of work, but I don't think we have any choice on this. Right. We're just going to have to do it. And we may have to come up with posters as well to poster as we go through, with whatever messages that we think are important. We may have 5 or 6 different posters, who knows. And then I'd like to mention something that's not urgent right now, but United Steelworkers Local 6500 is doing a tour through northern United States in second half of August. And they want a big strike. It's a steelworker local from Ontario. They want a big strike against one of the biggest mining companies in the world, I think over the last year or two. And it's sort of like their victory lap. They're going into every city and they want to support local struggles. So in Detroit, they're coming into here August 19th, and it looks like they're going to focus on the housing crisis, the foreclosure crisis. And what we want to do is tie it into the city debt crisis. And it actually, the Chicago Teachers Union wants to work with them when they go to Chicago. A lot of this is very fluid right now, could change within a month. But when they get to Chicago, which they'll do for 2 days, they're going to visit the Republic Windows and Doors workers. But they want to work with the CTU, and the CTU would like to collaborate and target the swaps and Bank of America in particular, because it's destroying the school systems in Chicago and the city of Chicago. Chicago and Detroit are among the most serious victims of Wall Street swaps. So we have an opportunity. This is still a month and a half away to link up the struggle against Bank of America in particular, but all the banks and the interest rate swaps. I just want people to keep that in mind, that that's coming up. But we don't want to wait till then to do our mass outreach. We need to start next week. And I would like to propose that we work on brochures like what Marilyn was talking about, and any other piece, anything else we need to start developing propaganda on. Let's start doing it.
Okay, Fred, and I want to mention we're passing a basket around because we spent about $400 on leaflets. We got 5,000 leaflets. We did a banner for last week's demonstration, and signs we did. So anything you can contribute, we really appreciate it because we need to keep these leaflets coming out. The corporate media is not going to typically publicize our meetings.
Not at all.
So we got to have our own mechanism for publicizing what we're doing. Fred, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed the first part of the meeting. I'm Fred Vitale. I'm from the Detroit Greens, but I'm also here for Detroiters Resisting Emergency Management, which is a coalition of organizations that is against the emergency manager for lots of different reasons, but mostly around the questions of democracy, that is that the emergency manager is a dictator, illegal in that sense, and secondly, around the question of race, that the emergency manager is really a racist representative of the government. And so those are things that, I mean, the question of the banks is there, but I think that these groups are, the group that D-REM is focused on is really around democracy. And I think that's an interesting question to deal with in this struggle here as this emergency manager struggle unfolds. So the two actions that are coming up is, number one, there was a meeting earlier today of the Change Agent Consortium. Reverend Bullock had a meeting at his father's church, and the focus was the emergency manager and the EAA, Educational Achievement Authority. And as a result of that meeting, they said, we need to have this dialogue with all the activist organizations. So they put forward a proposal to bring together, specifically mentioned Moratorium NOW, D-REM, NAN, the National Action Network, Change Agent Consortium, NAACP, whatever they're going to try to bring together everybody in July before the primary to have another sort of deeper, broader dialogue around the emergency manager struggle. So that's going to come up, and I expect you will get invitation. Certainly if you don't, let us know. The second thing is a similar event that's being organized by Detroiters Resisting Emergency Management for August. It's the same idea, I think, trying to reach out and get all the people who we've heard of who are against the emergency manager. And just to say, that I think the reasoning behind this is there's been a bit of a shock and awe that they've tried to do on us. Emergency managers just doing this right and left, and everybody's just kind of walking backwards as he, privatizes this and sells that and everything. And I think that just like shock and awe, there's a lot of fakeness in it. There's a lot of paper tiger in it, and there's a lot of not really a plan. I mean, they don't really have a clear plan on how this thing is going to unfold, and we can be a factor in this struggle. So the last thing I would do is say that we should begin to think about mass illegal actions. Okay? Think about it and talk about it honestly and openly. For example, what's happening in North Carolina, where hundreds of people have been arrested in a planned, organized, and mobilized thing against the state capitol. I know about North Carolina. Why? Well, because they're making a big fight. So there's something to be said for that kind of action. The second thing I would suggest is San Francisco 2006, the anti-war movement, where they openly planned to shut down the city. They said we're going to shut down these intersections, and they were counting on the fact that the city would support them. So again, in this emergency manager struggle, do we think the city is really against the emergency manager, just on a basic level? And would that open up the opportunity for mass illegal actions to take place? And again, I'm not saying that it does. I'm simply saying we need to be openly considering doing beyond business as usual. Business as usual, demonstrations, protests, letters, yeah, okay, fine. Let's think, at least have those conversations about mass illegal actions. How could we organize it? Is it possible? And if not now, when?
Okay, thanks a lot, and please keep us informed.
Information. Is there a date on that July meeting?
No, when they saw the results of their meeting today, they realized they needed to do something else. And so it's going to be before the primary, so it'll clearly be closer towards the end of July. And our meeting is, the D-REM meeting is looking at August 29th, something like that.
Okay, thanks. Marilyn, and then there will be a majority.
I don't know how significant you'll think this is, but they're still saying that 40% of adults and people in Detroit are functionally illiterate. And, you know, Baxter's idea of a bus, I'm sure we don't need a bus, but somebody mentioned earlier, not today, but having a bullhorn and driving down the street with something on the top of your car. And if people hear things, when you get to the door, you don't have to talk as much because they've heard something, and you can just explain a little and go on. I don't know.
Sounds good. We've done that before, sound cars. Yeah, you can reach, you know, thousands of people in one day. We got, real quick in there, Jared. Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Wisconsin, we had the right idea.
Yeah.
They had the right idea. We should have, Detroit should have followed in right behind that. And I think that's what it's pushing towards now. Today was the first day I heard somebody say at another meeting, say that it's time to shut the city down.
It is?
And I think that's really, yes, Sam Little said it's time to shut the city down. And I'm speaking for my union now also, along the local 207. We've been talking about this for years.
Yeah, I know.
You know, and it's finally starting to seem like, and it's going to take. Another friend of mine, whose name I won't mention at the moment, said that what it's probably going to take is people starting to feel the effects of what's happening. When they start losing their pay, when they... This is the guilty party right there.
But he's here.
But, yeah, he's here. Good.
I just want to mention, a while back, President Obama said that the banks were bad and he wasn't going to give any more money to them. I don't know why we're not piggybacking off of him. And the other thing is, if we're going to do something, we got to get into we're baby boomers, all of us, but we got to get into the other people, like doing the Twitter and the YouTube and being on the radio or Channel 20 or going to the festivals. You got to kind of get outside of the box, and you know, one thing, you know, besides just reading, you gotta expose yourself to the other things. That's all.
Well, if you can identify, you know, locations where we can reach, you know, these constituencies, let us know. We'll definitely go out. Jared?
Well, one thing, I mean, there's a couple things. One is, in terms of festivals, we should get a list of the festivals. One thing about Detroit, it's hard to reach masses of people in Detroit because we don't have a big functioning downtown. Well, it's functioning now more, but it's not functioning toward our class as much. And but there are good festivals, and we should get a list of those festivals, and we should be at every one of them. And because they're a chance to reach usually tens of thousands of people, and have tables. We could set up tables at them, even if it's across the street, and have our propaganda. And I agree. I think we should really make that a focus. You know, our outreach should follow that up and get a list of them right away, and start focusing on them. And a couple other points. One is, I mean, first of all, I want to say I'm in total agreement. I think we have to think bold too. That we're going to have to think about how to take this struggle to another level. Otherwise, and we have to be thinking about that at all times. And I really want to stress, I think we shouldn't feel we're alone. I picked up the other day, I was looking on Facebook, and suddenly there's a group that says, what was it? It was about what was it? Boycott
Ban.
No, this is not banned. This was United Fight Against Austerity. I didn't know who they were, and they were reprinting all our leaflets. They're not even Detroit. They're all over the country. Yeah, and they had a big thing about no more business in Motown, no business. It was interesting, and it shows because people across the country are looking at Detroit.
Yes, they
and so a bold action in Detroit can have a national effect. I really think, and maybe even international. The other idea that I wanted to raise immediately, though, was I was thinking about kind of the discussion in terms of propaganda. What if we framed kind of our next flyer along the lines of what Mike was saying and Marilyn was saying, as like a people's indictment of the banks, and do it and do it as an indictment, and make it look like it's an indictment to deliver to Orr. And because, you know, I mean, actually Tom was the first one to point out to me that he is mandated to do a criminal investigation. And of course the first manifestation of it is to go after the pension. It's a later basis for going after the pension. But why not do the leaflet as like a people's indictment and have we indict or, and we indict the banks for their role, and we say to cancel the debt. And these are the reasons. And in an indictment, you list specific reasons. And have 1, 2, like 5 or 10 facts with cites them, like you were saying. And it shouldn't be long, but like an indictment. And then have like maybe like a petition to go with it. I was thinking about like what you were saying, to go to take into the neighborhoods. That I support the indictment. My neighborhood has been criminally destroyed by the bank, and have people sign them, and then mobile and use that maybe as and that could be maybe an action, an interim action as we build the bigger stuff to go to OR, that we're delivering this indictment. We're delivering a people's indictment to say, and this is why we should be canceling the debt, and think about that. But I was just thinking that it might be catchy. It's one thing, everyone wants to indict the banks. Debbie always raises it. Well, let's indict them. Let's indict them. We can't wait for the officials, and maybe we can frame it in kind of almost to look like a real indictment, and we'll take it out, and there'll be a leaflet, and have a petition to go with it. So that was one other idea I wanted to raise. I mean, just 2 other real quick things. I think we need a youth flyer out on it, and I agree to tie in both the student loan and also one of the things we've been raising. The banks owe us funds. These funds can be used to rebuild the city and be a jobs program for our youth who have no jobs. And we need to get, and the youth have been coming around, they're not all here today, but we should have focused flyers. They go to, like the retiree flyer, they go to different constituencies to broaden the struggle out, to reach out. So that was another idea. But those are a couple of other thoughts. But I do think this people's indictment is something that we could frame up along the lines of maybe our next flyer can be more on those lines.
What happened to the idea of a general strike? Where is that? I feel like that is so long overdue. And I feel like we just keep doing these little things. And then people say, oh, well, we're building a movement. Oh, and don't they love to hear that? Oh, they're building a movement. They're just going to wait and wait, No, this is not something we should wait on. They're not waiting on it. They had all these things kind of planned ahead of time as soon as they passed that emergency manager law. I'm sure they had plenty of things already worked out.
Right.
There's one thing about Detroit that no place else in the country has that would cost quite a bit of money if we were to do something to stop the business that goes there. I don't want to be the one responsible for saying it. It's about
the bridge and the tunnel.
Yeah, $1 billion a day in trade. Yeah. Okay, Muhammad,
Yeah.
you said anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, at the DIA, Detroit Institute of Arts, which has the Two-Slit-Trek, the pyramids, art from Persia to Africa to Europe, which is valued well over $1 trillion if they auction it. They have no right to auction our art museum, and it's
That's
on
right.
the table. I don't know if you've mentioned it here yet, but somebody needs to get on that, because if they auction that, they're going to steal $1 trillion right out from under our nose, and they're not going to tell how much money they make off. This is stuff that doesn't belong. Belongs to the people, right? That's all.
That's our position. That's Sharon.
I want to piggyback on what Jerry said. I think we should do a YouTube video, or do a video that would go along with that flyer. And nothing more than that, just saying that. And also, we would all be able to put it on our Facebook page, because you can put videos up, you can do stuff like that. And just maybe spend some time so it make it catchy, or we could wear our Moratorium Now shirts, we could put on other shirts or something, just so that we get it out. And each time we put out a flyer, you do something on YouTube and Facebook.
Sounds great. What is your name again?
Dorothy Darnell. This is my first time here.
Please come back. We meet every Monday at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
So this is like a special strategy meeting. But we meet every Monday, so people are welcome to come back Monday at 7, and we have these same type of discussions.
Okay, because I came as a result of being at the march with all the literature that was passed
Wonderful.
out.
Wonderful.
Now, one of the things that struck my mind, which is what she said. Now, we all know, everybody in general says that the banks are responsible, but what's not put out there is that it's a crime. When I read that piece of literature that said it's a crime, that's what caught. I never look at it from that perspective to that degree. And so we need to say that real succinctly and real sharply, that it's not just their fault. It's a crime. They broke the law. You know, show a picture of the bank behind bars on that,
Right.
you know,
And the
from the
indictment. Yeah,
people's
right.
indictment. Put the bank behind bars and show them that what they did was criminal. I did not look at it to that degree until it was very short, very succinct, like with the people's indictment.
Right.
Why is it indictment? Bullet number 1, you know, bullet number 2. What law did they break, and make it short and sweet? Because people are not going to read a whole lot.
That's right.
I looked at that workers thing, and it's a good paper, but I'm a reader.
Right.
But for somebody that's not a reader, that's a lot,
That's
a little stuff, you know, to get to the bottom of. Some people are not really good readers. Some people are good readers, but they just not going to read a whole lot of stuff like that. So we got to make it short and sweet, because that's what got me here. And I thought, whoa, this is good. You know, they're getting rid of it's against the law. They are criminals and everything. So it's not that they just did it. It's a crime, and we need to show in the world. So I like, and then in that tweeter idea, these young people are tweeting. They on Facebook, and you got to get out there in the way that they like it, texting them and everything. This is what they do. They like all this new digital stuff. So that's what got me out here. It's like, wow, this is a crime. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here today. The flyer I saw was short, sweet, and simple.
Great.
This is
There you go.
Okay, we got maybe 3 more comments, and we need to wrap up. We got Cynthia, Debbie, Wolf. Cynthia, you got something else? And Baxter too.
Yeah, with regard to Orr, we keep concentrating on Kevin Orr, which we ought to, but he is there for because of Mr. Snyder, King Snyder. We need to remember that. He wouldn't be where he is if it was not for King Snyder. Okay? That's one thing. And I think I had another thing, but I forgot.
Okay, we can come back to it.
Yeah.
Baxter and then Debbie and Wolf, and we can wrap up there.
Okay. I just want to say once again, just like everybody was saying here, the movement is growing when all the groups come together and the unions and everybody realize that the bigger picture it involves everybody your struggle. It's the same as my struggle. It's the same as her struggle. It's the same as everybody's struggle. And some people don't even know that they in a struggle.
I know. Right. I know.
And because they're living in the fear. And we have to make sure that we understand that whatever we do, there is a lot of people that's living in a fear. And the fear has them comfortable. I'm not talking about comfortable because they got a brand new pair of shoes. They're comfortable when accepting what is happening to them. There's a comfort, there's a dangerous comfort. It's a dangerous. And so that's what we have to make sure that we deal with that.
Okay. All right. Wolf and then Debbie, we'll close out after that. Wolf.
We can easily, with the bus and the board home and a group of people. I did it from just 2 weeks' time with Sharon Bell when she ran the city council, going door to door from maybe Jefferson all the way from Grand Boulevard all the way back on the other side of towards Chalmers and up towards the lake, with 2 or 3 people with my kids. We get a map, strategize it out, and carve it up.
Yeah.
But we can take the whole city, get numbers of people, because once we go out there and go door to door with a bullhorn and everything, people would know what's going on. Pinpointed flyer like you have, out what's really going on, how these banks are crooks. And once they know, we can do the whole city. I mean, that's what the group here, because once people know about it, they're going to join and just go from door to door, while somebody down there with a bullhorn, block by block, strategize, city, just like the people campaign, and go door to door. We can get the whole city in maybe 2-3 weeks' time.
Okay, Debbie?
Well, to do that, you probably need a focus, some event that you're trying to draw people out to, and that, I think, I like that we do need to do the community thing. But I would still suggest, it's summertime. Invite some of your neighbors over and bring them in and just, a couple of us can stop by and we can sit down and talk to them about what's going on and why the city, that it actually is incumbent on every single resident of the city of Detroit and the surrounding area, because we're all under siege.
I know, the whole world.
But that it's an opportunity to just get to know your neighbor and maybe figure out if this person, and they know what you're doing and you know what they're doing, but how can you bring them in to an awareness of the critical situation that we're in. And like I said, it's summertime. Maybe if we could, if you could pull together a hot dog, a hamburger thing at your house and say, come on down. I just, it's a lot going on, and we're in this community. Let's talk about what we can do, just in our little area. It's a way to start to bring people out of their homes and into an awareness of the serious situation that the city of Detroit and all of our residents are facing, and that we really have a stake in doing something about it. So, Debbie, that's what you do. I was sitting there thinking, well, Deb, you're talking about it. Maybe you got to do it. So, you know what? And then sometime this summer, I'm going to invite everybody on my block over for a barbecue, a get to know ya. Great. And this is what we want to do. And hey, what's your thoughts? So it's a way to reach out. And ultimately, this isn't going to occur overnight. But the fact of it is that we're going to have to build up events. First, they start in your neighborhood, in your block, and then they emanate out from there. But really, what we are going to have to do, and it culminates in, something big. I'm something big. Now, you were talking about a general strike, honey. For a general strike to happen, the workers have to be in motion. And you must know that's not happening. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to create that motion. So, that's what you can do. So if you think you can pull it off, and you need us to come, a couple of people from here to come over and sit down with your block, then do it. Be bold, and see what happens. So
okay, I remember, because she said what she said. Let me just say this real quick. I think that we can have a general strike. When are the taxes due in July? That's one thing we could do. Not pay those taxes.
Yeah. That's Monday. Yeah, I think
that's Monday.
Monday.
Ryan and Sharon and then Walter, and then we could close it out.
Okay, I'd just like to say that I don't think we can leave out the emergency manager for the schools.
Right. I agree. We need to conclude that.
And what's happened is, over the last 4 years, the emergency manager for the schools has totally taken over, not totally, but very close to taking over our school system. This is a system we've paid for. These are schools we've sent our children to, and these are schools that are now being closed. We can't we can't forget that, and we have to also see how closing these schools has destroyed our neighborhoods.
That's right.
So I see this as a tie-in. If we're going to be attacking neighborhoods, that people in the neighborhoods have to see that part of that destruction has occurred because schools have been closed.
Okay, Sharon.
I don't have anything.
Okay, Walter, and then Mike.
I was just going to say that the back in the 60s when we tried to get people mobilized, the news it was a newsletter that we had called the Illustrated News, and we distributed them to all the different churches in the city, and so they were free for the people in the churches, so that as they left they could pick up the newsletter and read what was going on. And so we used that to get people motivated, and they came together, and we had lots of meetings, and so then that's when the movement really took place.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, we got to move on.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of good ideas here, but that's insufficient for getting the struggle going. We've got to implement this, which is actually the most difficult part, and we don't have time to do it today, but that's the purpose of our Monday meetings. They're organizer meetings, and we're going to have to start rolling up our sleeves and getting the work done. We've got to write leaflets. We've got to organize crews to go through the new neighborhoods. We've got to organize crews to go to the festivals at Hart Plaza. We've got to just start doing it. So I would, like I said, we can't do it now, but please come on Monday. We meet every Monday at 7 o'clock here, and this has got to be our focus. We've got to lay out the work plan and implement the work plan, okay? That's what our supervisors tell us to do at work, right? We know how to do it because we've been doing it for 30, 40 years. So come on Monday, please. All these ideas will not get off the ground unless we roll up our sleeves and make it happen.